Hey guys, what is up? Super K Man Rocks here, and I am here for my MSI Day number 5 main stage overview and analysis video. We are finally out of upper bracket round 1. We've gotten all 4 series out of the way. We have seen every single team here in the main stage of the bracket play at least once, and that means we're moving on to some series that have real consequences. We're gonna have 2 in today's video. It's the only weekend the entire tournament where we're gonna be doubling up on series, on best of 5s, and so don't worry, this is only going to be a 2-episode thing, but we are going to be going over 2 different series in today's video. We're going to be covering, of course, the first of the round 1 lower bracket series, so we're going to see the first team officially eliminated from the main stage, and of course, the first of the round 2 upper bracket series to see who makes winners finals already. We're already, that far into the tournament with only 8 teams in the main bracket. Making top 4 and winning in top 4 means you're in top 2. It's just kind of how that ends up working. So, I'm excited. Hope you guys are. Let me know down in the comment section below, what did you think was going to happen in these 2 series? Of course, I will be previewing, what I expected out of these series. I'll be talking a bit about what I said in my primer and just generally where I was at when it came to these teams going into these series. But if you want to hear my thoughts on it to know I'm not lying from previous videos, you can check out the playlist up in the iCard right now. That's going to have the thoughts of all of these teams and, especially at the end of yesterday's video, my thoughts on these matchups and what I expected to happen on today's, slate of games. And so if you're interested in that, check that out. But of course, let me know down in the comments what you expected and did it go according to plan for you. But without further ado, let's get right into it. If you are new here, what we're going to do is go game by game in each series, talking about the advantages and the disadvantages that each team was able to generate. I'll be giving a player of the game and a dud of the game for each game, and then at the end of each series, I will be giving a player of the series to kind of tie everything into a nice, neat little bow. We will be previewing the 2 series that are going to be happening later today at the end of the video. If you are excited for that, stick around for that, but today will mostly be spent covering the games that we got here on essentially Saturday morning here in North America. I'm sure it's even more Saturday morning for a lot of you out there if you're watching in Europe or other places in the world, but I'm excited to get into it, so let's do that. We've got a lot to cover. I don't want to waste too much of you guys' time. Let's get into our first series, and it's going to be the lower bracket that starts us off. The Western Rivalry, probably the only NA versus EU matchup that we are going to get at MSI this year, so a lot of stakes on the line. It's the number 1 seed from the LCS in Team Liquid, taking on the number 2 seed from the LEC in Fnatic. This is a pretty interesting series because if you go back to my primer, my pre-tournament analysis that I put out before the play-in stage, I gave these 2 teams the exact same grade. I think that they are entirely equal in terms of what they have shown so far in 2024, and specifically, I think they both have lanes and areas that they excel in, and then lanes and areas that they really struggle in, and I'll boil it down. I don't want to spend a ton of time on the intro here or on the preview here. I said as much in my primer video. This is really going to be a matchup between Razork and Humanoid versus Impact and Yon. Who can carry harder? Can the jungle mid of Fnatic be stronger than what is kind of quote-unquote the weakness of Team Liquid, at least domestically in the jungle mid of them? Or can the side lanes of Team Liquid, top lane and bot lane, be better than the quote-unquote weaknesses of Fnatic in the side lanes that they have? That's going to be kind of the argument, because for Fnatic domestically in the regular season, it was Razork and Humanoid. When they were playing at a top level, they could beat anybody. They took a game off of G2, not only in the finals, but they beat them in the regular season in best of 1 as well. And so you're looking at a team that definitely can win games, like definitely can beat TL and can dominate the series. It can really, I guess, not make things close if they really wanted to, but a lot of that's going to be up to Razork and Humanoid, who are the team's best players. Again, lucky for them, they're going into a team where the opposing jungle mid is kind of the quote-unquote more questionable part of the team. APA has certainly drawn a lot of criticism for his small champion pool, even if I do think it's a lot bigger than people give him credit for. People have criticized his laning ability, and I think that there are valid criticisms when it comes to that, and I do think Humanoid should be significantly better than someone like APA. I do think Razork should be significantly better than someone like who I am significantly lower on, and I have been basically his entire career. And so that's an avenue where I think if Fnatic just wins that super hard, they're going to win the series. But on the flip side, for Team Liquid, what were the lanes and the avenues that got them an LCS title this past spring? Well, Impact was the best top laner in North America once again, and he is somebody that is really capable of just taking tank versus tank matchups, winning them super hard 1v1, and transitioning that into being unkillable in team fights. It's something he has done super successfully over the course of his long career, and Oscar certainly certainly not somebody who is prone to being the most stable top laner, especially in 1v1s. And then you look at Team Liquid's biggest strength domestically, and it was their bot lane. Yan and Core were the best bot lane in North America by a gigantic margin. It wasn't particularly close. Yan's ability to dominate the isolated 2v2 really put Team Liquid above everybody else domestically. He was picking things like Smolder, and he was picking things like Zeri. And because he was so good in the 2v2, so much better than every other North American AD carry, he was just winning those matchups anyways and getting to play in the late game, which was typically his weakness as a player, with a Fed Zeri and with a Fed Smolder to kind of hide some of his positioning errors. And so, you know, Yan, I think, is a player that could absolutely dominate a series like this. Noah is not somebody I trust a whole ton. Now, Noah and June have been getting better recently. Not so much, I would say, at this tournament, but, you know, at the end of the playoffs in the LEC, I definitely think they started to develop their chemistry. Jun, in particular, has been this team's best player over the past month or two, and I think that that's a positive. But, you know, if top and bot win for Team Liquid, that's their avenue to win. If mid and jungle win for Fnatic, that's their avenue to win. It really is that straightforward. My prediction was Fnatic in 4. Really, it's Fnatic in 5. Like, I really would expect this to be a close series. I would be shocked if these two teams are drastically different. Like I said, I gave them identical grades, just in very different ways. TL definitely a little bit more like, I want to scale and play late game, and Fnatic, like, I want to fight all the time. So they're not the same team by any means, but I think they kind of end up in the same grade for me. But we'll have to see what happens on the day. Anybody can win on any given day. So let's go ahead and check it out. Going game by game means we get to start with game number 1. And the winner of game number 1 was Team Liquid. They are going to take the first game of this series. They're going to go up 1-0. And this is the kind of trend, tone-setting, you know, start to the series that they really needed. I think that they needed to be able to come out and say, hey, we actually can just beat you. Like, we can draft pretty standard comp, nothing out of the ordinary, and just come out and be the better team, be a little bit more patient, you know, take a lot of these fights really slow, and not ever try to push our advantage, and then slowly just chip away at Fnatic to the point where they just can't play anymore. Were there mistakes in this game from Team Liquid? Absolutely, but there were significantly more from Fnatic, and that meant that Team Liquid was just going to have a lot more pressure on the map, which is exactly what they had. For Fnatic, a couple of players on this team sucked this game. I'm not going to try and sugarcoat it. There were a couple of performances that were just atrocious in this game number 1, and they're going to have to be better if this team wants any shot at being able to take this series. If they have 2 or 3 players on the team just playing horrible like they did in this game, that there just is not an opportunity for them to be able to win. So we'll talk about it. There are a lot of narratives surrounding this series. Not only is it NA versus EU, which is always going to draw some, you know, criticism, some noise, I would say generally some banter between the two regions, but they added fuel to the fire. Like, there was trash talking, and that's not rare for Team Liquid. That's pretty normal for Team Liquid. Yappa in the mid lane is certainly not afraid to go out there and talk shit, as he did throughout the entirety of this series in all chat. Whether winning or losing, like, it didn't really, like, no matter the game state, he's just always gonna talk. It just kind of is what it is. But Oscar coming out in an interview saying that Team Liquid is not on their level, saying that Impact is washed. That was something that I think he chose to regret in this game. Don't call Impact washed. Of all the players to shit talk on the enemy team, Impact is not that guy. He is pretty notorious for, if you shit talk him, he's going to go and absolutely stomp you in the next game, and that's what he did here. I mean, I know he got Cassante, and Cassante is ridiculous, right? He's, 11-1 after this game in terms of the main stage, in terms of the performances. Cassante just wins. The only loss that Cassante has had was Impact against top Esports, where they were just outclassed on every level, but this champion is broken. I get that, but Impact also just mega outplayed Oscar. He froze wave under tower. Oscar didn't get to play the game, and then when he overextended, just solo killed him. It was a perfect set of storms for Impact. He shouldn't be able to dominate the early game like this. That's not a Cassante diff. That's an Impact diff in terms of the early game. Now, the late game stuff where he becomes unkillable, that's a Cassante thing. Like, watching him 1v1 Noah with Noah having no damage and almost winning it from, like, 0 HP, it's very funny, but, like, the early game, give all the credit in the world to Impact, who just don't. Why would you shit talk him? Why would you do this? Why would you even open up that can of worms? And Oscar definitely paid the price. Impact was great here, but player of the game for me, gonna go to Yan. And this is what we talked about. He got mega gapped in that top esports series. Not that that's hugely shocking. It's Jackie Love. I made the statement at the beginning of this tournament that we're all gonna be walking away from MSI 2024 being like, oh, I forgot how good Jackie Love was. Like, that's gonna be one of the major takeaways, is that people just forgot that Jackie Love's a top 380 carry in the world. Well, Yan has shown that, yeah, it was just Jackie Love. Like, he mega stomped Noah in this game. Like, I get it. The 2v2 is not everything. Being able to win as Lucian Nami into Kalista Renata, I understand that that's not always, like, oh, you know, you have to be the better player to do that. But you do kind of have to be the better player to win by as much as Jan did. He massacred Noah in the 2v2. Anytime they were in lane together, being able to get advantages in the mid game. Jan was just so much better than his opposition on the other side of this matchup. He gapped him so hard, and his positioning was so aggressive that he created so much for Team Liquid, especially in the mid game, which is why, to me, he's player of the game. Core going deathless, really good game from him. He played with Jan very well. APA was pretty good in this game. People are going to look at some of the mechanical misplays that he had, like the 1 or 2 mechanical misplays that he had, but very similar to what I said about, like, ironically enough, like Faker in their series against G2 in game number 1. Like, you can overlook some of the mechanical misplays if he is making good macro reads and is always in the right place at the right time. And, you know, there were people yesterday that were like, Talia's so bad. Like, why would you ever pick this champion? I hope those people are just, like, not watching the games. I hope that's just, like, an ignorance take rather than, like, an actual opinion people have. This is a better example of, like, you don't even really have to be, like, perfect at Talia. Like, she's just going to dominate the game anyways. This champion just does everything. And then was excellent. The early game from really carried Team Liquid through. He played really aggro. They were able to get first blood by invading enemy jungle, and then his ability to constantly be in the right place at the right time to either stop dives or progress top lane in Impact's favor, super, super valuable. Team Liquid just played well. They were playing fights very slow. They weren't overextending when they didn't have to. This was just a really good game, and it was very up their alley. As for Fnatic on the other side, not as good. Like, not as good. I don't really know what else to tell you. There were 3 members of this team that just didn't show up here today. Oscar, Razork, and Noah. Horrible in game number 1. All of them deserved out of the game. I can only give one of them. It's going to go to Noah. 1-6-0 on Kalista. He was down like 40 CS in this game. Just was never relevant. Kalista is supposed to dominate lane, especially with Renata. That 2v2 should be majorly in favor of Fnatic. It's something they have gotten better at. Jun in particular has gotten better in the 2v2, but they got slaughtered early on in this game, and they never recovered. Noah was absolutely useless in this game, could do absolutely nothing. Oscar getting solo killed on the top side of the map. I get that kind of set that lane up to be in favor of Impact, but Impact taking that and just rolling it out of control, and Oscar never giving over resources and dying for it. It's just bad gameplay. Like, Oscar played horrible in this game on Zac. He made the matchup look incredibly unbalanced. This is not an unbalanced matchup. This is not like a super Cassante favored matchup in terms of the lane. Like, Oscar was just bad. Like, I hate to say it. Razork was also not good in this game. Just went in a little bit too early in a lot of these situations, felt a little bit disconnected from the rest of his team. I think if he had played a little bit more with Humanoid, specifically on the Orianna, I think things could have gone differently in the mid game, but alas, we're sitting here. Humanoid was pretty good, was the one pulling back a lot of the positive plays for the team, was able to turn a dive into a couple of kills on the top side of the map, which was really good. That kept Fnatic in the game and actually gave them a gold lead for a majority of this, but he couldn't be everywhere, and even when he was in fights, he actually got picked off really early on in one of the first pivotal fights of the game by APA with the seismic shove over the wall, and that just kind of ended his ability to be able to play fights, as Orianna can be really difficult if the enemy team has a lot of range, and that's kind of what we saw here. And then Jun was generally fine. I think some people are going to look at some of his mechanics in this game and say, it could have been a bit better on Renata, and I agree with that, but he certainly wasn't the problem. Noah, Oscar, and Razork were the problem. If the question was whether or not Razork and Huma were going to be better than Impact and Jan, game 1, not at all. Like, Impact and Jan mega outplayed Razork and Huma, and that's the key to victory for Team Liquid. So, moving into game 2, Fnatic has to win this. You have to be able to tie up the series. You don't want to have to win 3 in a row against Team Liquid. You can do that, but you don't want to have to do that. You don't want to be in that situation. And TL, if you can get that 2-0 lead, you're in a really good spot in this series, especially in terms of confidence, which this team thrives on. So, who's going to win game number 2? Well, the winner of game number 2 was Fnatic. They are going to take game number 2. They're going to tie up the series at 1 apiece. Necessary game win here for Fnatic. You can't drop 0-2, and they didn't. They came out, and they played a lot better. This was a much, much more Fnatic-style game for them. A lot of skirmishes, a lot of weird trades early on in the game that they were able to take advantage of, and really just capitalizing on some very good drafting decisions and some really good draft ideology to get themselves advantages in that direction and take away the things that Team Liquid are good at, and all of a sudden now you can win the games. Like, it really is that simple. I'm not saying that if they do this the rest of the series that they're guaranteed to win, because I don't think there is that big of a mechanical difference between these two teams, but this is the formula. Like, this has always been the formula for Fnatic, is get them on things that they're comfortable on, and especially against Team Liquid, take them off of the things they're comfortable on, and that's not just champions, that's play styles. Team Liquid with a very Fnatic draft in this game. Lee Sin plus Ahri, that's not Liquid. Like, this is not the Liquid that won the LCS. The Liquid that won the LCS played for team fights. They played to scale into the late game. They really only ever wanted to play aggressive around picks when it came to Core JJ, when it came to and when it came to Yon. APA, never somebody that was like this big shove and roam type of player that wanted to look for picks. And certainly him and as a duo didn't really look to do that. So I think both teams kind of going in directions that favored Fnatic in game number 2. I'll just say that as much. But really, the most obvious gap in the entire game was top lane. Oscar Rinnan's going to get player of the game here on the Poppy. Talk about a counter to K'Sante. I know we've been complaining, me included, about K'Sante's win rate and just how consistent it is that this champion continues to win on the main stage and that there really doesn't seem to be an easy counter. Well, here's your counter. Poppy is your counter. This thing dominated game number 2. Was up like 70 CS, was up like 4 levels by the end of the game. Every single place that Poppy went to, immediately Fnatic had pressure, and everywhere, every fight that Poppy was in, immediately Fnatic was able to win it. Like, it really was that big of a difference. Oscar making good use of that trash talk in this game. This is the Oscar that needed to show up, the international Oscar that people talked about from last year. This is the version of him that needed to show up in this series for Fnatic to hold a chance to win this, and that's exactly what he did. Excellent game from him. I think Razork was much better here. Definitely struggled a lot more in the Lee Sin. They got a pick early on in the game on Razork, but after that, they struggled to really find anything for this Lee Sin to be useful on. Like, mechanics were good, but he was just behind in pressure all of the game, and that's never going to be a good thing against the Xin Zhao, and especially against Humanoid's Azir. That is just a disaster, and Humanoid maybe a little bit too aggressive at times. People are going to look at that mid lane engage where he just goes in for the Shreem and Shuffle for absolutely no reason. It really kind of draws back to the quote that I have on this channel, and, you know, if I had merch, I would absolutely make merch out of this, but the LEC Azir syndrome, you know, thing that I talk about all the time in my LEC reviews, even in other regions at this point. For those who don't follow my channel, LEC Azir syndrome is, it's not a want, it's a need. When LEC mid laners play Azir, they have to go for the Shreem and Shuffle. They have to be the initiator. There is not a single Azir in the LEC in Europe that just plays him like a front-to-back team fighting champion. Like, there is not a single player in the region who does that. It's why I call it LEC Azir syndrome. And so anytime I see a player, you know, AFK, kamikaze his way into a fight and just die for no reason when he can just be a front-to-back fighter on Azir, I call it LEC Azir syndrome. Humanoid definitely still exhibiting that, but for the most part, he's still so good at this champion, and when he did actually fight front to back, he did a really good job at it. Noah and Jun were better. They didn't have the same kind of responsibility, and generally Lucian Nami, I think, fits their playstyle better, but this was a topside victory. This was Oscar dominating. This was Razork having a good game, Humanoid having a good game, and Fnatic being able to capitalize on that. Again, that was their key to victory, so it's good to see them do it. Then for Liquid, just some underperformances around the map. I mean, Impact got brutalized in this game. He's going to get dead of the game. This was a pure counter to K'Sante. There was no way for him to be able to play this. Even watching it, I'm not even really sure what he was supposed to do in this matchup. Poppy just completely owned him. Oscar Rinnan just completely owned him in this game. This is one of the worst Impact games I've ever seen. Like, he really got taken out of this. He was never useful. Very easy choice for dead of the game. Was also much worse in game number 2 than he was in game 1. He is a very volatile player. He's somebody who, especially like in the LCS, has become either win in the early game and I can start to snowball, or I'm not really all that useful. Like, he's not a good jungler at playing from behind. It's going to remind a lot of Fnatic fans of Razork, but Razork is just better than and so I'm not shocked to see this go this way when is put on something that he has to be a lot more proactive on, that requires a lot more, quite frankly, execution than something like a Sejuani does. Yon and Core also just weren't as relevant. Core, some say we're still waiting for that flank over the wall in the Baron fight from him. Don't really know what was happening. He just kind of sat there and watched his entire team die without going in at all on the Rel. I don't know, like, did he forget that he could do that? It is what it is. Yon also way too far forward. His positioning is a double-edged sword. He's only ever going to be able to beat the best players in the world positioning the way that he does, being super aggressive, playing on the edge of danger, risking it all, but also it's going to get him into situations where he is way too far forward and he's getting chunked out at the beginning of fights. Again, I would rather take the aggressiveness. I'm not going to criticize him too much for that, but it is definitely a double-edged sword. APA was pretty good this game, had really good mechanics on the Ahri. For a guy who can't play Ahri, he played Ahri pretty well, so I'm not going to criticize him all that much, but Team Liquid, again, going out of their comfort zone, going for this skirmish pick-oriented style of competition into Fnatic, or composition, not competition, into Fnatic, who is, like, perfect for this. Like, they want this. They are encouraging Team Liquid to do this. So I think you just need to get back to the basics, get back to what you're good at, which is these front-to-back 5v5 team fights, the macro-oriented style of play. That's what Liquid does best. If Fnatic can continue to pressure them in draft like this, it's going to be a pretty free series for them. So Game 3 becomes very important. Winning this, gaining control of the series, it does reset basically everything. It puts both teams, you know, back in the position to be able to take the driver's seat. But who's going to be able to take it? Well, the winner of game number 3 was Team Liquid. They are going to take game number 3. They're going to retake control of this series by going up 2-1. And yeah, get back to basics. Slow things down a little. Don't go out of your comfort zone. You don't need to do that in a series like this. You don't need to be pulling out Ahri plus Lee Sin. Pick Aurelion Sol. It's left up for you on R5. Why? I have no freaking idea. They banned Sejuani Volibear instead of Aurelion Sol, and Ziggs was up as well. Like, the disrespect shown the way of APA is incredible, and, you know, we'll talk about it. They made him pay, but, you know, have a better understanding of what you want to do with the rest of the draft. You know that you're going to be able to land Poppy here. You know they're not going to feel comfortable taking that early on, so you pick it up in the jungle to pair with the K'Sante. They no longer have the counter pick. Core JJ gets his Ashe, which he has been terrific on. I think this has been his best champion so far in 2024. It really has opened up everything that TL wants to do. We know they like to play for those 2v2 advantages, but Core, specifically on Ashe, plays these team fights so well, can really set up a lot of different things. And Jan, just give him an AD carry that can kind of do the thing, right? Like, it doesn't need to be any sort of specific champion. He's a little bit more versatile in terms of the things that he can play, because he kind of does the same thing on every champion. So this draft is way better for Liquid, way worse for Fnatic, and I think that generally does make a bit of the difference, but I do want to say this isn't unwinnable for Fnatic. I see so many people saying, like, what could Fnatic possibly be thinking? They have a couple of really good lane matchups here. They've got Zac, like, they've got Hui, they've got, you know, Kalista plus Rumble, which should win lane here. Like, it should win lane hard, and they just didn't do any of that. The Wukong is also one of Razork's bigger picks over his entire career, and so I don't really sit here and look at this Fnatic draft and say this is unwinnable. I think Team Liquid just also got all of the things that they really wanted to play, and Fnatic opted into a style that I think did favor Team Liquid, at least slightly, so that's certainly something to talk about, but yup, APA's player of the game. What a mid gap. I mean, who predicted this? I mean, if you had this on your bingo card, props to you, man, but who predicted that there would be a game in this series where APA would gap Humanoid so hard in the mid lane that it was unrecognizable? Multiple solo kills, absolutely dominating team fights, seeking him out in every single team fight to get him out of the game as early as possible. I mean, this was domination from APA. I have not seen Humanoid lose like this in a long time, and that's credit to APA. He clearly has gotten inside of his head a little bit in terms of the all chatting. Humanoid was definitely looking like he was playing a little bit tilted. It's hard to really know, but he definitely played a bit different in this game, and APA, I think, definitely is starting to get under his skin a bit, but he was excellent in this game. The positioning was really good. Got to play his signature champion. I mean, even more than the Ziggs. People like to say that Ziggs is, you know, APA is a Ziggs one trick, right? That was the meme. No, APA, if anything, is an Aurelion Sol one trick. Even pre-rework, like, as somebody who's watched Tier 3 and Tier 2 in North America all the time, this guy's played Aurelion Sol for years. Like, when you go back to the solo queue version of Always Plan Ahead, like, this guy, or sorry, Always Plan Ahead, like, this guy was an Aurelion Sol one trick. This is just who he was, so to see him be able to get it here on the biggest stage, why? Why are we allowing this? Why give me Acel if you can't play versus? Like, I don't understand. It doesn't make any sense to me. So credit to APA, he was excellent here. Everybody else also did their jobs. Like I said, Core JJ was excellent in this game on the Ashe. I think I just want to continue to see him play this. Like, just let him continue to play this champion. He's clearly so practiced and so good on it, and he plays the laning phase well, he plays the mid game well, he plays the team fights well. He's just really, really good on Ashe. I honestly like him on it more right now than I like him on Engagers, which is not something I thought I would say. Jan was also very good. All he needs is setup. He's going to position aggressively, and so if he's allowed to do a bajillion damage, he can do that. He was highest damage in this game, even over APA on the Aurelion Sol. He was that good. Like, there was a real, like, debate back and forth on whether or not I should give player of the game to Jan or to APA. was much better here on the Poppy. There was one fight in particular in Bottom River that he just insta-won, knocked up 3 people, completely delayed the entire game for them, and, you know, just ran over him. And Impact was a lot more stable in this game. K'Sante didn't feel ridiculously broken or overpowered, but he was still more valuable than Oscar on the Zac throughout everything. So credit to Liquid. They did what they were supposed to do. They got back to basics. They didn't overcomplicate the problem, and they won game 3. For Fnatic, I'm concerned. You're now a game away from being eliminated from MSI, the first team eliminated in the main stage, which would definitely be a bit of a disappointment. And with the way that you went down here in game 3, it certainly doesn't inspire confidence that game 4 or game 5, if you get there, is going to go any better. Dead of the game is going to go to Humanoid. Like I said, mega gapped in the mid lane. This is a really bad Hui game. I think Hui's really strong right now. I think especially after the buffs, this champion's actually in a really good spot and can definitely counter, quote-unquote, Aurelion Sol, if that's the direction you do want to go in. Didn't in this game. Multiple solo isolated deaths for Humanoid, was dying first in basically every single team fight. Just was accomplishing nothing. This was a very, very bad game from him. And I'm someone who's low on Humanoid, right? That's kind of been a hallmark of the channel over the past few years, is that I've been, you know, lower on Humanoid. I push back on all these analysts saying that he is like an A+ tier player when it comes to the LEC. I don't get it. Like, he's way too inconsistent for that. This is an example of a game where it's like, yeah, like we see this out of Humanoid every so often. People just like to pretend that it doesn't exist sometimes because his good games are very good. So, you know, I'm not shocked to see it happen, but this was definitely, this is definitely not good. And then Razork also just not particularly useful in this game. Some of the engages were solid, but what are we thinking re-engaging in that upper jungle right after June gets picked? Right after Jun gets picked on the Rumble, they all hex gate in, and Razork's like jumping on Yawn on the backline, and Noah's just trying to fight, and it's like, what are we doing? Like, they get aced and they lose Baron and the game is over from there. It's a game-losing play and it's 0 IQ. Just no thought, no decision-making. Noah continues to be way worse than Yawn. Even in the game that they won, Yawn pretty heavily outclassed Noah in lane. We expected that. Like, Yawn is better than Noah. That was clear if you watched the LCS, but it's coming to fruition here in terms of the international stuff, and Jun can only do so much on the Rumble. This is just not looking good for Fnatic. They are on series point here, and MSI point for them. If they lose this next game, they are eliminated. If Team Liquid wins this next game, they're up. Like, they, you know, 14-14 was the number going into this series. NA had won 14 of the last 28 games. EU had won 14 of the last 28 games over the last 2 years that these two regions had played against each other. This is a big series for bragging rights. This is a big series to see who can stay alive in this tournament, and Team Liquid is one game away from being able to take that. Are they going to be able to close it out in 4, or will Fnatic push us to a Silver Scrapes Game 5? Well, the winner of game number 4 was Team Liquid. They are going to take game number 4. They're going to take this series with a 3-1 win, and they are going to be moving on to round number 2. And unfortunately for Fnatic, this will be the end of their MSI run. This will be their final game, and unfortunately, EU not getting it done this time against NA, and that is unfortunate. Definitely, I know there's some EU fans out there that are going to be disappointed by that. I'll have some comments to make on that in this section here. In fact, I'll probably talk about it before we talk about the game, but I do want to say Fnatic still looked pretty good at this tournament, all things considered. They at least tried to pressure Gen.G. Like, they weren't able to take a game, but they were competitive in that series. They were better than I think I expected them to be, and they took a game off of top Esports. I think that's pretty solid. They were able to look pretty dominant in the play-in stage. There are a lot of things to like, I would say, for Fnatic at this tournament. I don't think it's an utter disaster for them. I think they definitely wanted to win this series, and they're going to look back on this and feel pretty bad that they didn't, but I'm going to explain why I think it's pretty crazy to call this like an upset or some sort of like major disappointment for Fnatic that they lost to NA. I'll talk about that now. I don't get this narrative, and, you know, feel free to let me know in the comments. One thing that I really think that I might just be missing is that all of this is just banter, and that all of this is just like I'm not European. I'm not in the communities. I don't know if all of this is just said in jest and I'm not getting it, but so many European fans just treat the LEC like it's above the LCS, and I don't really understand why. Like, I would have understood 2018, 2019, 2020, yes, like the LEC was better than the LCS, and it wasn't close. Like, G2 was one of the best teams in the world, and even teams like Fnatic and Mad Lions for a time, like, these were teams that could compete to make, like, MSI finals and look pretty good in specific circumstances, but we're pretty long way away from those days, and even with G2 looking good here, there's really no difference outside of G2 between the LCS and the LEC. Like, and the results back that up. Not only does NA have a winning record against the LEC over the past 3 years, they're 17-15 right now, but, like, results-wise, they're basically identical over the past couple of years. Like, there really has been no discernible difference. Obviously, you know, G2 is going to be a bit of an outlier because they're an org that just has more pressure and power than other orgs. Like, Caps, individually as a player, is better than everyone else in both regions, is better than everyone else in EU, is better than everyone in NA, and so when you have these moments where you have someone like Caps, like, you're just going to be more elite in a lot of situations. Although, I don't know, like, we'll see what happens with G2. You know, I don't know if they're, like, gonna do better than Team Liquid at this tournament now that Team Liquid's moved on. Like, I don't know if they're gonna get past round number 2. Like, I don't know if either of them are, but I don't really get where this idea of I think it's an antiquated holdover from, like, the last pseudo-generation that EU is just better than NA. And this isn't some, like, anti-EU propaganda. I'm not trying to sit here and say that EU sucks or anything like that. But what I'm trying to say is that LEC is not better than the LCS. Like, maybe I'm gonna get heat for that take, but that's just kind of become like a regular opinion. Like, the LCS can beat the LEC and the LEC can beat the LCS. They are like of equivalent level. They are on the same tier. They have been on the same tier for the past 2 or so years. And I don't think that this is really like an upset. Seeing the LCS champions beat, you know, the team from the LEC that was good but not great, like, yeah, this is what I think is pretty fair to say. Like, this isn't some sort of upset seeing NA beat EU. Like, NA can beat EU, EU can beat NA. Like, they're of the same level in my eyes. Let me know if I'm just not getting the whole, because everything you see on Twitter is like, Fnatic should be embarrassed for losing to NA. Why? Like, why? Like, these regions are of the same talent level. Expecting EU to consistently beat NA is fool's gold at this point. Like, that doesn't exist. That hasn't existed in the last couple of years. And I'm not saying NA is better than EU. Like, that's not the point I'm trying to make. I'm not trying to sit here and say that the LCS is better than the LEC. I'm not trying to sit here and say that there is like, oh, it's ridiculous for the LEC to think they could beat NA. What I'm trying to say is that both of these teams had an equal, like, I had the same grade on both of these teams. These regions are of very, very, very similar talent levels, and so I don't understand why either team would feel like they gypped it by losing this. This is like a 50-50, and so congrats to Team Liquid for winning the 50-50. They were definitely better today, and, you know, I think that this was a really good showing of what they are good at. I'm glad they got to show that off internationally. Jan is one of the first players that I have to talk about. He's not player of the series. He's not player of the game, but he is the player that I want to talk about first, because I think when you're looking at differences between the two teams, this was the biggest difference, is the AD carry position. Jan showed what he showed in the LCS. Like, this was domestic Jan. This was the reason I was so hyped on him going into the tournament, is because as an individual 2v2 laner, as somebody who can push advantages and is going to posture ridiculously aggressively on champions in team fights, like, he's going to dominate. He's going to output a ridiculous amount of damage. He's always going to top the damage charts, and he's always going to be relevant. And when he's playing well, when he's on the edge of danger, when he's not just mega gapped in terms of mechanics, he's going to look amazing. And he looked amazing in this series, and Noah just couldn't quite keep up in all 4 games. Even Fnatic's wins, I think Noah looked like the worst of the AD carries. So that is really somewhere where I wanted to start, but really, how do you talk about this series and not talk about my player of the game in Game 4, my player of the series, APA, in the mid lane? You can give 4 bans. You can ban Acel, you can ban Ziggs, you can ban Talia. Well, I guess it's 3 bans, because Twisted Fate's probably not for him, right? He does play TF, but I imagine it wasn't for him. But, you know, 3 bans, and he's just gonna go to Tristana, a champion that he's supposed to be really bad at. Remember, he can't play Tristana, and he's gonna play it really freaking well. That was a sarcasm, by the way. He can play Tristana, he can play Ahri, he can play these other champions. This narrative that he can't has gotten so far out of control that it's pretty ridiculous, but I'm glad that he got to showcase that on an international stage. He was unbelievable in this series, and quite frankly, he was leaps and bounds better than Humanoid, and pun was kind of intended there with the Tristana. Like, this was not a close mid lane matchup towards the back half of the series. Games 3 and 4, APA was just strictly better than Humanoid, and I want to give him a lot of credit for that, because he had to step up and do that. He had to be able to come out here and perform with all the noise that he himself created, and, you know, that past teammates have created talking about his playstyle. He had to come out here and prove that those were false allegations, and that's what he did. Looked very good in this series, playing off of the rest of the team. I really like him on these tanks. I think it's a playstyle he's really settled in on. Core JJ was excellent in the back half of this series. He's not going to get the kind of credit he deserves, because APA and Jan are going to get all the credit, and they deserve it. They were the 2 best players on Team Liquid in this series, but Core also deserves a ton of the shouts for how well he played. You know, obviously not giving over the reset to Razork in that fight in top river is literally game saving, and then being able to heal Impact so that he doesn't die in that fight is literally game saving. Multiple moments where the Nami just comes in incredibly clutch. Core was awesome in this game, and Impact, to his credit, didn't have to do a whole ton in this series, but, you know, he was really good when he had to be. He was just a tank, and he didn't let the Cassante get out of control, which was his job. So credit to Team Liquid. They did everything they were supposed to, but the Team Liquid Academy players, the players that were developed by this organization coming from Tier 2 to Tier 1 in APA, in Jan, they're the ones that give the biggest results here on the biggest stage. This is what happens when you invest into young players in North America. Is it a surprise that the 2 teams that represented NA here at this tournament are the only 2 that actively still have developmental teams? Big shocker. So credit to Team Liquid. Credit to Spawn, the coach here, who has trusted players like APA and Yan. I know I'm going on and on, but this is a big win for this team from a mental perspective, and, you know, I'm really proud to see them go and get it done. And then for Fnatic, again, I don't, like, this whole argument that I made at the beginning of this of it's kind of fool's gold to say that the LEC should be beating the LCS at this point. That's to say that Fnatic shouldn't be lambasted for this loss. Fnatic shouldn't be like, oh, you let us down. Oh, you should have won this. Oh, it's ridiculous that you got outplayed by Team Liquid, a North American team. I think that that's a pretty ridiculous way to look at it. I think that maybe they were favorites going into this series. I think I gave them, you know, my favoritism going into this series, but it wasn't by a lot. Like I said in my primer, these two teams had equal grades. For them to lose this in 4, it's not a shocking outcome. This is not out of the realm of possibilities, and I don't know why people are treating Fnatic like they're some sort of, like, traitors to Europe for losing this series. They just kind of got outplayed in the areas that they're not quite as good on. Noah was not good in this series. He's going to get the dead of the game for game 4. And like I said, the biggest gap in terms of one-to-one position, like, role gap was Yan versus Noah. Yan just was way better in this series, especially in lane. But the rest of this team wasn't great here. Humanoid was not as good as APA. Even after game number 2, like, game 2 was good for Humanoid and game 1 was okay, but games 3 and 4, just, like, not good from Humanoid. Razork never really got the reset in this game to be able to take over in fights and made some critical mental errors that I think hurt Fnatic. And Oscar not able to get the job done on Cassante, not only the broken pick of the patch, but also his signature pick at, you know, at a pro level. This has been the thing that he has dominated on over the course of his career. So Fnatic, you got to give them, you know, props for attempting to try and stay in this series, but they just didn't have the juice. Team Liquid was better on the day, and so they're going to be the team moving on. Fnatic's going to have to go back. I don't think this team's going to make any changes. Maybe top lane. I only say that because, you know, players like Odo Omne are available, and I'm not saying Oscar Rinnan's bad, but is Odo not just, like, perfect for this team in terms of what you kind of want to see from them? I'm not going to try to make any sort of, like, roster judgment calls here, but if Fnatic makes changes, I would be a bit surprised. And Team Liquid's moving on. They're going to play the loser of Billy and T1, so good luck to them. Like, you know, this was a good win. It's why I was trying to hype them up so much here, because I don't know if it gets better from here, but this is a really, I think, encouraging win for a very young team. A team that, even domestically, people didn't expect to do all that well. This team was predicted to get, like, 4th or 5th in the LCS, let alone go international and win a series. So congratulations to them. They're young players being the ones to carry them there. Super encouraging, and I'm just really excited for the Oregon for the team. But then moving on to our second best of 5 in this video. Again, we've got some super days here this weekend. This is the upper bracket one, and this one, I think, just as interesting in terms of a matchup. These are two of the best teams in the world going head-to-head, a very different dichotomy from what we just got. It's the number 1 seed from the LCK in Gen.G taking on the number 2 seed from the LPL in Top Esports. It is the first matchup between the LCK and the LPL in 2024, I believe, and that is really, really fun. That is a big deal, and there's a lot of bragging rights on the line in this series, and there's certainly not a lack of star power between these two teams. Two of the most fun and currently famous players in the world going head-to-head. Chovy for Gen.G, Jackie Love for Top Esports. I'm really excited to see where this ends up going. I think both teams have advantages. Both teams have lanes that I think they can play for and really maximize in a matchup like this. I do think mid lane is going to be a really big swing point if Chovy is just the best player in the world and is mega gapping Cream every game, which I do think is a pretty realistic outcome in a series like this. Cream probably being the weakest of all 10 players in the series, and Chovy certainly being somebody that is more than well known at being able to beat players who are definitively worse than him. If that happens, if Chovy's just able to run away with it, I don't think the series is going to be particularly close. I think Gen.G is going to just have an easy time there, but at the same time, like on the same foot for Top Esports, like they actually have a pretty interesting matchup into Gen.G, because what's Gen.G's weakness been? Well, it's been the 2v2 in the bot lane. Paze has honestly really struggled in this current meta for a lot of different reasons. What I've said on the channel mostly is that I chalk it up to meta. Paze is a very late game hyper-scaling type of player. Zeri, you know, Aphelios, like these are the most played champions that Paze has over the course of his career. These are clearly the things that he is the most comfortable on, and it's just not really a meta where that is super common right now. Kalista, Lucian, like those are the things that really dominate. Varus, these are the things that dominate the meta. You're not seeing a lot of hyperscalers at least get regular playing time. You're seeing the occasional Jinx or something like that at this tournament, but it's really been Kalista and Varus, and that's really kind of been the dichotomy. And Paze I just don't think fits that meta as well, and they're going into the strongest part of Top Esports, which is their bot lane. Jackie Love and Mako have been excellent at this tournament so far. Obviously, they gapped Yawn and Core Core. We just saw how good Yeon and Core are, and so that's all of a sudden become a pretty good series, like a pretty good achievement for them, but it wasn't a big shock. They were amazing in the play-in stage. For my money, Jackie Love has been the best player at this tournament by far up until this point, and so when you're looking at where these teams could create their own advantages, yes, Chovy could gap Cream, yes, Canyon could gap Tion, and yes, we could see like circumstances in which like Jungle Mid just gets out of control and Gen.G just wins the series immediately off of that, but if top esports can play through bot lane, and hell, if their top lane can be better, which I also think is certainly a possibility with 369 up there, then I think they have a shot at being able to make this interesting. I still think Gen.G are favorites going into this, that's what I would have said, but this is number 2 versus number 3 in my power rankings going into the tournament. I think Gen.G is better, and I predict them to win 3-1 because I do think there is a tier gap between these two teams, but top esports should be able to make this more interesting than I think a lot of people are giving them credit for, but we're gonna have to see, and of course seeing means we get to go game by game as we just did in the previous series, and that means starting with game number 1, and the winner of game number 1 was Gen.G. They are going to take the first game of this series. They're going to go up 1-0, and what a clean, nice victory for them. Maybe you could have liked to see them play around the Draven a little bit better when it came to Jackie Love and, you know, getting him a lot of these cash outs, which he actually was able to get in the early game. Perhaps you maybe wanted to see them play around the Akali a bit better, who was actually able to operate in a lot of space in this game, but for the most part, they did everything they were supposed to, and the carry duo really pushed Gen.G over the top in game number 1, and I think that's the most encouraging thing to me. As I said, not the carry, but the carry duo of Gen.G, because that's really been the question mark for them. As we noted in my kind of preamble to this series, is that Paze really has been the weak link of this team. He's not been the strength in the bot lane for Gen.G, but he certainly was in this game. He's going to get player of the game in game number 1. This is huge. If Pace steps up, and if he can perform at bare minimum, like equal to Jackie Love in this series, I don't really see an avenue for top esports to be able to win any of these games. I like 369, I like Mako, you know, Tion and Cream are good. They're not going to be able to beat Gen.G if Jackie Love is not popping off in this series, and so if Pace is matching him in terms of the output that you're going to get, that's going to be a bit of a problem. Now, this game was a little bit weird. You know, lane swaps are super common now to the point where I don't even really bring them up in my analysis anymore because they're just kind of every game, but there were some weird shenanigans in terms of level gaps in this game. 369 got super far behind, and Paze was donated like 3 or 4 kills before 5 minutes, and that certainly helps you be able to play Kalista, but that's the point of picking Kalista, is that when things start to go all willy-nilly in the first 5 minutes of the game, especially in a meta where you're moving pieces around, Kalista is easily the best champion in the game at being able to take advantage of that situation. So credit to Pace. His team fighting was excellent in the back half of this game. He was certainly the focal point for where both teams wanted to put their resources, whether Gen.G wanted to play around him or alternatively whether or not top esports wanted to try and shut him down. They were clearly trying to play for Pace. I know that there are going to be a lot of people that look at Chovy and look at the damage numbers and say that Chovy was more valuable this game. And honestly, in a lot of circumstances, Chovy's damage was more valuable in late game team fights, but Gen.G don't win this game without the pressure that they were able to get from their AD carry early on. So Paze is going to get player of the game. Like I said, though, Chovy was also excellent. I'm very critical of Corki picks. I just don't think Corki is as good of a champion as people out there like to make him believe. But if there's one player who has proven that he is above that rule, he is an exception to that, it's Chovy in the mid lane here, who is just the best Corki player in the world, and it's not particularly close. He's able to utterly dominate games on this champion. Even in the mid game, even when Corki's not supposed to be strong yet, like one item Corki, he's absolutely obliterating people in terms of his positioning. And it's really, really fun to watch. Chovy's the best player in the world. What else do you want me to say? Lehens was super good this game. I think the Alistair knockups were all really well timed. Canyon was solid on the Vi. Didn't really have to do a whole ton in the late game, but was good. And Keen got gifted like the easiest job of all time, getting to play Vayne into a Cassante who was like 4 levels down the entire game. So, you know, I'm not going to sit here and say Keen popped off, but there was definitely a top gap. And overall, Gen.G looked very good, but the carry duo really stepping up, and I think that that is a big positive sign for them. And then for top esports on the other side, again, the carry duo was okay for you. It's not like your carries got completely outshined. Jackie Love got a couple of cash outs early on in this game on the Draven. He just never really had the same kind of speed that Corki plus Kalista ended up having in some of these front-to-back 5v5 team fights, and he had to play so much safer because of the threat of danger from the Vi and from the Alistair in terms of engage, but he was still pretty okay in terms of his individual play. I think Cream was pretty good this game. He was actually applying a lot of pressure. Like I said, there was a lot of space for the Akali to be able to create. This is his signature champion. It has been ever since he came through the ranks as Crime on OMG. He has always been an Akali player, and, he's clearly shown a mastery of the champion. There just weren't a lot of avenues for him to actually get on priority targets. He was getting 1v1 by Chovy by the end of this game, purely because of the difference in wallets, and that's definitely a little bit disappointing, but dead of the game is pretty easy. It's gonna go to 369. We talk about Cassante having such a ridiculously good win rate right now at this tournament and being really strong. Here's a good way to stop it. Lane swap and get him behind 4 levels. Yeah, that'll take him out of the game. That'll definitely work. 369 was completely useless in this one. Easily the worst Cassante game of the tournament up until this point, and I'm not even entirely going to blame him as a player. His team abandoned him. Like, he was put in a miserable spot, but he was useless. Like, this was a 4v5. This Cassante did not exist, and they picked it first in draft. Like, that is just never a good situation to end up being in. Mako was okay. Tian was okay. I'm not going to criticize him too much. Tian had a couple of really bad team fights, but for the most part, I don't think he really did anything horrendously bad. I just think Top Esports gave over too much pressure to the Kalista early, and when Paze was online, like, Chovy became the most annoying player in the entire world, and they couldn't recover from that. It's a pretty standard game number 1, but Top Esports has more than enough firepower to be able to fight back in game number 2. You certainly don't want to go down 2-0 to Gen.G. Having to win 3 games in a row against the LCK champions is a daunting task, to say the absolute least, and so this is a pretty big must-win, I would say, for TES in game number 2, but for Gen.G, if you can get that 2-0, you're feeling pretty good. You're definitely feeling confident, and, this team definitely has more than enough talent to take advantage of that. So, what's going to happen in the second game of this series? Well, the winner of game number 2 was Gen.G. They are going to take game number 2. They're going to go up in this series 2-0. And this is a dominant game and a dominant lead for a dominant team from the LCK. This is exactly what you wanted to see from the number 1 team from the LCK. You wanted to see them show up internationally. I know this org and this team and some of these players have been criticized in the past for not being international players, for not showing up when the games matter the most. Chovy in particular has definitely gotten an unfair reputation in that regard, but I'm glad to see that at least at this tournament so far, everything has gone according to plan. They have yet to drop a game through their first 5, and Fnatic and Top Esports are okay teams. Like, they're not completely garbage rosters. Like, Top Esports is a good team, and Gen.G has just mind-controlled them into being horrible in this one. Jackie Love and Mako were solid. We're going to talk about them. The Lucian Nami definitely fits them well, and there were a couple of great traits for them in the 2v2, but it just doesn't matter. It is a team gap, it's a macro gap, and it's a decision-making gap for Gen.G, which they've done against everybody else that they played against over the course of this year. So let's go ahead and talk about it. Player of the game, going to Chovy in the mid lane. I think you could give this to Lehens. Super earned it for a lot of the game that he played on the Lulu. Really excellent stuff from him. I know he kind of gets this weird reputation of being only an engaged player. I actually think his enchanters are great. He just plays them like engagers, right? He just plays super aggro. He's very Hillisang in that regard, but I think he's just really good on everything. Lehens has always been underrated, even by me. Like, going back to, like, 2021, I was a Lehens hater, and then 2022 happened, and 2023 happened, and now 2024 is happening, and I'm like, okay, well, I've changed my mind. Like, I'm no longer a Lehens hater. Paze has showed up. Like, he has activated Paze mode. He is back to what he was last year, and that's all they really need him to be, is even like a 75 or 80% of what he was in 2023. If you're getting that out of Paze, he's going to dominate back on comfort here with the Aphelios. Like I said in the preamble here, this is something that's a lot better for him, that hyper-scaling, more late-game oriented ideology. That's what he was really good at last year. So even if Aphelios isn't the most meta AD carry in the world, and even if you're going to lose out on some of those 2v2 trades because of that, like, Paze was so much more useful in a lot of these mid-game fights because he just felt more comfortable on a champion like Aphelios that can play front to back. So really like that out of him. Canyon gapped Tian. I mean, the jungle pressure was out of control in this game for Gen.G. I know the scoreline doesn't necessarily show that, but Canyon was unbelievably good on Lee Sin. And then Keen was good outside of that weird teleport into the bot lane where he just died for absolutely no reason. Love that for him, but player of the game is going to go to Chovy. Tank Azir was made for him. Like, there was no one in the world that I think more embodies the idea of Tank Azir than Chovy. Like, the way he plays the game, where he wants to be a primary damage dealer, but he also kind of needs to be engaged for his team because he's the best and most talented engaged player, but he also does kind of want to be a little bit more aggressive in terms of his positioning so that he can do that damage. Like, it's just perfect. It's the stars aligning for Chovy, and his Azir is so clean. Some of those ultimates this game were absolutely beautiful. He saves them for the the middle of fights, which I think is the optimal way to play Azir at the pro level, because it does catch out these 80 carries and these lower mobility champions, not only after they've used a lot of their cooldowns, but also when they feel like they have the kill shot in their eyes. When a lot of your teammates are weak, you can ult them away or ult them in, and you can all of a sudden reposition the fight in your favor depending on what you need to do. Chobi's kind of the master at that. So excellent game from him, but excellent game across the board from Gen.G. Their macro was simply the best in the world, and that continues to be shown. And then for top esports, JackeyLove and Mako were good. Like, that's definitely the takeaway. Their 2v2 was really solid. They were doing well in fights, but it just wasn't enough. There was some mind control going on with some of the other players, you know, jungle mid on top esports, where they were just running in and dying, and I don't really know what was going on. Tion's gonna get dead of the game for me. I think across every single play, he was the one that felt the most gap. The Sejuani just didn't exist at all in this game. There were multiple moments where it's like, you just gotta chill out, man. Like, you gotta stop trying to force the issue, and you're late to objective fights, and you're not really able to secure anything. Like, there were just too many negatives from Tion in this game for me to feel good at all about his performance. People are gonna look at that Cream death where he just overchased into the jungle for absolutely no reason to try and kill Lulu and just died because clearly he was going to die. Like, it was one of the most greedy, like, solo queue plays I've ever seen, but outside of that, he was generally fine in this game, so I don't think he's, like, dud of the game worthy. 369 also just continues to be getting outplayed by Keen. This is a little bit of a rough matchup. TF has generally been considered strong here, but the Renekton did feel useless, which is certainly something to point out. But if JackeyLove and Mako are going to have to 2v8, this series is doomed. Like, top esports aren't dead in the water. They can win any game. This team is talented enough to win any game. Like, there is absolutely an opportunity for them to keep this series alive, but to win 3 in a row against Gen.G, that is certainly an uphill challenge that they are now going to have to face. So, can Gen.G close out this series in a clean 3-0 sweep and show their dominance that everybody proclaimed at the beginning of this tournament? Or is Top Esports going to keep their tournament hopes alive for at least one more game? Well, the winner of game number 3 was Top Esports. They are going to take game number 3. They're going to stay alive in this series at the very least for one more game. And they looked excellent in this. This did not look anything like the first 2 games, where it really did feel like Gen.G was just kind of outplaying them in a lot of different, pretty critical areas. Chovy and Pays in particular looked amazing in the first 2 games, and while I don't think either were a disaster in this game, Chovy's still maxing out the damage charts on Corki across the entire game. They certainly didn't have the same kind of impact, and they certainly didn't have the same kind of map pressure that they had earlier on in the series, and a lot of that is just a credit to Top Esports. They played really well in game number 3. This was a clinical, strong performance where they were able to get a good lead with some good early skirmishes, some good early fights, getting a lot of the gold onto JackeyLove, and then transitioning in the mid game into taking a lot of these objective fights around the power that Maokai Tristana ends up offering you. Why overcomplicate the process when you can simplify it back down to the thing that the LPL has been doing all playoffs long? Maokai plus Tristana. This is like the LPL mid-jungle duo, and it's carried a lot of teams in the LPL playoffs. Top Esports was one of them that played this combo quite a bit, and so for them to go to it in an elimination game, or at least like an upper bracket elimination game here, you know, it's tried and true. It's the safe play, and it ended up really working out for them. Player of the game for me is going to go to Cream in the mid lane. He was excellent in this game. The mechanics were absolutely there. His ability to jump in and out and obviously to dodge skill shots in this game was imperative, because Ryze is a bit of a problem, Jarvan is a bit of a problem, Nautilus is a bit of a problem in terms of the things that you need to be worried about in this particular comp, but Cream was just never really in any sort of danger. He was taking a lot of damage pretty early in some of these fights, but he knew exactly when to lay back, he knew exactly when to jump in, when to play aggressive, when to be the cleanup crew. He was just really good this game. Cream's honestly been pretty good in this series so far. He was really good in game number 1 when they were just like generally strong, like Gen.G was good and they were better, but Top Esports was still okay. In that first game, I thought Cream did an okay job on the Akali creating the space, and I think he was really good here in game number 3 as well. I know people were concerned about what Cream's international debut was going to look like, whether or not he was going to be able to keep up with some of the other best mid laners in the world, and there's definitely been times where it's been a little bit shakier at this tournament. He wasn't perfect against TL, but this is a really good sign. Like, he outplayed Chovy, at least for one game. He went out there and outplayed Chovy, and that's all you really need him to do. And then JackeyLove and Mako were also excellent. They have been the rocks of this team, not only here at this tournament, but in the regular season as well. They have been excellent. It's JackeyLove and Mako. I mean, what else do you really want me to say? JackeyLove has given a ton of gold and a ton of kills early. He was looking to be the carry of the game here. If Cream didn't just completely pop off in every single mid to late game fight, this would have been JackeyLove's player of the game. He was excellent. I mean, he was fed a lot early, and obviously you got to give a lot of credit to some other members of the team, which we will talk about in just a second, but JackeyLove has continuously shown that if you give him the smallest resource, he's going to turn that in to a massive lead and to mega damage in a lot of these fights. So credit to him. Mako was excellent in this game on the Alistair. I really think this was like a defining game for Mako. Like, I know I've been hyping him up, and, you know, he, to me, at times was the best support in the world over the course of this year. I very much considered putting him as the #1 support at this tournament over on going into this, because I think there's a realistic, like, chance that he is just kind of the best support in the world right now. But I just didn't feel confident enough to say that they were the best bot lane in the world. And, you know, all things considered, I feel like I made the right choice there. But Mako was excellent in this game in Game 3, setting up everything for both Cream and Jackie Love in the back half of the game. These were some of the best Alistair team fights we've seen all tournament long and, you know, really all year long. So great game for Mako. Tian was good on the Maokai. Didn't really need to do a whole ton this game. Oftentimes when you pick that Maokai plus Tristana duo, you're trying to play around mid-jungle in the early game. You're trying to get that mid laner moving around the map so you can skirmish, and the skirmishes did happen in this game. They just weren't quite as, like, centered around the mid-jungle duo. It was a lot of bot lane skirmishes early on before they transitioned into objective fights. And then 369 was generally fine. I actually don't think he was great on the Rumble. Some of those fights were really good. Like, Rumble just does a lot of damage if he's able to scale into the mid game, which he was able to do here. But I don't think 369 has actually been all that good at this tournament. I'm still kind of waiting to see the version of 369 that we all know and love actually come out at some point, because it just kind of feels like it's been a little bit lacking in terms of the performances so far. But top esports, much cleaner, much better. Even the negatives, like, you can really chalk up to just kind of like natural variance. I think TES had a very, very clean game here in Game 3 to keep themselves alive. For Gen.G, just a very skirmish-heavy game. It plays against their style, so I'm not going to sit here and be like, what are you doing? Because I understand, like, you're up 2-0 in the series. This is already a team that has shown in the past, even at this tournament against Fnatic, to be willing to just be like, well, let's go out there and have some fun because we're in a really dominant part of this series, and they were able to get away with it against teams like Fnatic. They're not able to get away with it here against top esports. Just way too active in the early game. Pays and Lehens got kind of left on an island, and Canyon really was never there to ever really salvage them, is all I'll really say. Lehens is going to get dead of the game for me. Every single Nautilus hook was a problem for Gen.G. Like, they just were in bad positions because of it. They were overextending in situations because of it, and he really had no impact on the game overall. I think if you wanted to give it to him, that's fine. I am going to give it to him, but if you wanted to give it to Canyon, that's also understandable. Canyon, I think his pathing was really bad, put Gen.G in a lot of really bad positions in this game, especially with some of the early fights that they just absolutely did not need to take. You know, Chovy was dealing a lot of damage on the Corki, but a lot of it was after fights were kind of over. Like, a lot of it was either kind of useless poke or just after fights had already been decided, after Cream had already been getting resets, and it was like a 3v5 at that point, and then Chovy decides to unload the whole kit. Like, it wasn't like meaningful damage for a majority of the game. I think that damage number is a little bit of a lie. And I'm a Chovy defender, not meant to be any hate, just wasn't really all that relevant in this game. Pays, certainly not as good as he had been in the first two. Keen, going for that counter pick, the Ryze on the top side. This is his signature champion. I don't know if Ryze is super viable right now. I understand it in terms of, like, its lane swap meta, and Ryze is actually a pretty interesting candidate for lane swap meta because of just how useful he is, probably isolated in a 1v2, but I don't think Ryze as a champion is all that strong, and so when you do get that regular matchup into Rumble, Rumble's just way more useful in the late game, so Keen actually can't really trade in a lot of these fights that happen around, like, Void Grubs or anything like that. It's just not something that the champion is designed to really do, and Ryze really falls behind in that regard. So generally, I think Gen.G just dropped this game because they kind of just didn't take it as seriously. That really felt like what Game 3 was. If they bounce back in Game 4, then okay, well, Top Esports definitely was gifted a really nice opportunity, but this was really clean out of them in Game number 3. If they were able to replicate this for Game number 4, all of a sudden you're going into Game 5 with all of the confidence and momentum that you could possibly have. Is that going to happen, or is Gen.G going to show that Game 3 was a bit of an outlier? Well, the winner of Game number 4 was Top Esports. They are going to take Game number 4. They are going to tie up the series at 2 apiece, and we are going to yet another Silver Scrapes Game number 5 in our first, 6 series of the tournament. We've gotten 3 Game 5s here in the main stage. I know that we've gotten 2 3-0s in that same department, but honestly, MSI's been a banger so far. I talked about this in yesterday's video when I was doing these overviews, when I was talking about the T1 G2 series, which was obviously awesome. This tournament's like on pace to be one of the best of all time in terms of the games that we've gotten. The Billy PSG series, G2 T1, you know, TL getting a really strong win here today, I think will be a positive or negative kind of sight depending on what side of the pond you live on. But this series is an absolute banger as well, and the games have been really fun. Both of these teams have really shown up. up. I think this has just been a great tournament so far, and I think this was another game that just kind of encapsulated that. Top Esports not going down without a fight. They played excellent in this game, and there were some criticisms on this draft on Twitter, on Reddit, after it had been, right after Champ Select, like right getting into game. Cream, Corki, like this is something that gets memed on in the LPL. I push back on that all the time because Cream is a lot more versatile than he gets credit for. I think LPL fans have failed to really grasp the transition that he's made this year in particular on Top Esports. The last couple of years of his career on OMG, he has been that assassin carry oriented player. He's really not somebody who has like pushed the boundary of that bubble all that much. He's just been very good inside that role. He's always been able to play things like Azir and Orianna, but really he wanted to be aggressive. That was always kind of the style. This year, it's been a complete change for him. It's a big reason why Top Esports was able to beat JD Gaming twice in the playoffs, was Cream actually being such a good supportive presence. Like, he played a lot of Karma this year. We saw a lot of, like, more mage-oriented picks out of him. He can scale. Like, his champion pool, I think, expanded a lot going into 2024, at least from a pro standpoint, and so I don't think I'm really all that shocked to see him be able to pull out something like Corki and really dominate on it at a high level. Like, he's playing against Chovy, and he's just straight up winning right now. He's player of the game here in game number 4. Once again, that's back-to-back player of the games for Cream. This dude is taking over, and I'm really excited to see that. I think people were concerned about the consistency of Cream. I'm still concerned a bit, like from a game-to-game perspective, because Cream's always going to be the kind of player who can have a bad game here or there, but he's having an awesome series. Like, he is really kicking ass right now, and he is the reason Top Esports has stayed alive so far. Those Corki rockets are just ridiculous damage. We've seen it from Chovy on the other side of this matchup, but Cream getting it in this game, like, he was just everywhere. Like, he was so good in this one. Tion was also out for blood in game number 4. Really excellent game from him. He's going to go under the radar because Sejuani isn't quite the eye-catching pick. Like, the plays that he's making aren't going to be quite as noticeable as they would be on other champions, but this was his best game of the series by far. He gapped Canyon. Like, we'll talk about Canyon in a second, but Canyon played horrible in this game, and Tion was a big reason for that. Was constantly disrupting the things that Canyon wanted to do. All of the plays that Canyon wanted to go for, Tion had scouted. This was a world champ game. Like, this is the Tion that you wanted to see show up at this part of the tournament. He was excellent here in the jungle. The Sejuani really fits him, and if this jungle mid duo is going to win, if they're going to be the better jungle mid duo, like we talked about with Gen.G in games 1 and 2, we talked about this with Paze. If Paze is going to be just as good as Jackula, Gen.G is going to run away with the series. But if Tion and Cream are going to be just as good as Canyon and Chovy, if not better, TES are going to run away with this series. It's a really interesting dynamic, really interesting dichotomy. Jungle mid has stepped it up majorly in the last 2 games for TES. I think Jackula and Mako are also excellent. Jackula was awesome in this game, got donated a lot, but that early skirmish in the bot lane, that whatever level 6 play that Gen.G went for, that was disaster. I mean, we'll talk about it when we get to them, but a macro disaster class. Jackula got super fed off of that and was able to kind of snowball that out. Mako is really good on Ashe. He's one of the few LPL supports that actually plays this champion. We've talked about it on this channel. LPL hates Ashe support. They just don't play it all that much, but Mako does. Mako is somebody who feels confident in the pick, and it worked here. And the Urgot certainly has been 369's most successful pick over the course of this series so far. So really good stuff from Top Esports. Very clinical, very strong game from them. And Cream and Tion are kind of the ones leading the charge. Like, Jackula and Mako deserve a lot of the credit as well, but Jackula and Mako were doing well in games 1 and 2, and the rest of the team was losing. The reason things have turned around is because Cream and Tion are now playing well. So credit to Top Esports, credit to that jungle mid duo. And then for Gen.G, ooh, man, you are in danger. Like, reverse sweep would be a pretty disastrous moment, and we just talked about it. They got away in this game. Like, I don't know what happened. This is the worst game that Gen.G has played in a long time. Like, they didn't play like this in the LCK. They didn't get tested like this in the LCK. And I know I got a lot of pushback for saying things like the LCK actually isn't really all that big of a challenge right now. It is at the top. Like, Gen.G, T1, Hanwha Life, like KTDK to like a pseudo extent. Like, yeah, there are 3 and then 2, like, kind of 2 good teams in the LCK, but the bottom 5 teams, absolute nothing. Like, you're getting nothing out of them from the LCK level. The LPL is definitely going to be a bigger challenge than people expect it to be, and that's kind of what we're seeing here. They just can't get away with some of the aggressive, risky decisions that they've made over the course of this year. That being said, some of the things that they did in this game were super antithetical to how they got here in the first place. What was that level 6 play in the bot lane? That was one of the worst plays I've ever seen one of the top teams in the world make. Like, I would have expected that out of NA and EU. I would not have expected that out of Gen.G, the macro-oriented team out of the LCK. Very strange stuff. Canyon in general is going to get done of the game here, because what was he doing this game? Like, truly, where was he going? What was the pathing? What was the fighting decisions? Like, why did he contest every objective when his team was super far behind in gold and not roaming to it? Like, it was just so strange. Like, very, very weird decisions from Canyon. This is reminiscent of 2023 and 2022 regular season Canyon, when he was having problems just, like, surviving in some of those games. This is bad decision-making, and it really cost his team, but Chovy getting outplayed on the Azir, this was not good. Like, this is the worst game Chovy's played in quite a while, and that's certainly something to monitor. We've been calling him easily the best player in the world over the past couple of weeks and months, and he has been, but this was bad, and Lehens wasn't able to do anything on the Alistar, constantly going in without the rest of his team only to die. Pays couldn't do anything on the Kalista, although I don't really blame him for this game. This one was not his fault. Keen got roasted by 369 in lane, and then really couldn't be all that relevant out of it. Turns out Cassante does have weaknesses. Overall, Gen.G's just getting away from the thing that got them here in the first place. Calm, slow, collected gameplay. They went up 2-0, and then they kind of just like took that for granted, it seems like. I'm not going to try to get in their own heads. I'm not going to try to psychoanalyze the mental of these players, but what it looks like on the surface is we're winning 2-0. Why should we have to play slow and calculated? Let's go for these big flashy plays because we're better. And then all of a sudden now the series is 2-2 going to a game 5, and Top Esports has a ridiculous amount of momentum. This would be a disaster. If Gen.G got reverse swept in this series, you know, the choky allegations would simply never cease. I know obviously the loser is not eliminated. They just moved down to the lower side of the bracket, but this would be a bad loss for Gen.G. For TES, they're happy to be here. They should have gone down earlier in this series, but they continue to fight. They continue to make this fun. They continue to make it interesting. Can they cap off this awesome series with a reverse sweep, or is it just not going to be enough to get over the Titans that are Gen.G? Well, the winner of game number 5 was Gen.G. They are going to take game number 5. They are going to take this series, and they are going to avoid disaster with the reverse sweep on the horizon. They are not going to let TES do it to them. They are going to play this game number 5 relatively well. There was some back and forth here for sure. JackeyLove played his heart out, and he certainly tried his best. You know, all 5 games, really, JackeyLove played phenomenal for Top Esports. He was by far the most consistent player across this entire series for both teams. That's not even disputable in my eyes. JackeyLove continues to be the best player at this tournament, and I expect him to continue to be that for quite a while. He really has been exceptional for Top Esports, and when people asked why I was so high on this team going into the tournament, JackeyLove was a pretty big reason for that, but unfortunately just not enough. A couple of mistakes, some pretty crucial ones down the stretch for TES that leave them on the empty side of this, with Gen.G coming out on top, but in the early game, it didn't necessarily look like that was going to happen. Now, this was a weird game because Top Esports was consistently getting kills and getting map pressure, but they weren't getting gold. Like, they didn't have the gold lead really at any point in this entire game. They were up like 4 or 5 kills to 0 at one point in this game, and they were at a gold deficit. Almost all of that, I will say, was top lane. Keen played excellent in this 1v1, was really, really strong on the Cassante. This is the best game that he had all series long, and we'll talk about that. I don't think he was quite as impactful in some of the team fights, but his ability to survive the laning phase actually really helped Gen.G coast through the mid game and really allowed them to play that macro-oriented style that they become so accustomed to. But what a crazy draft. We have to talk about it. I mean, B5 Nidalee in game 5 of an upper bracket MSI series against the LPL number 2 seed. Are you kidding me? I get it. It's Canyon Nidalee. Like, this is his signature champion. Of all of the champions in the world, like, this is the one that you think about when you think of Canyon. But now, here, like this, with Corki, with Cassante, like, what are we doing, man? This is a crazy, crazy decision to make, but somehow, some way it pays off in the way that you would least expect. Canyon got bodied in the early game here in terms of pathing. Tion did a great job to be able to take away some of the more aggressive routes that Canyon could potentially go for to just kind of pacify the game, if you will, and TES obviously was doing a good job of keeping their foot on the gas in terms of some of the fights they wanted to go for. Cream, I think, was doing well in the early game to apply that mid lane pressure and to be kind of the shove and roam option, because Corki really has no way to continue that fight, and so Nidalee really was isolated for a lot of this early game, creating a situation where her strengths as a champion are just not being used. But Canyon dominated the team fights. I guess Nidalee is a teamfight champion if you hit every single spear. Like, I guess it's that simple, huh? If you can hit every single spear, you can win teamfights on Nidalee. Who would have thunk that? Like, it shouldn't be possible, but here we are. Canyon dominated and carried the late game here. He's going to get player of the game for me. I do think this is disputable. Keen was super integral towards how this team survived that mid game, but like I said, Canyon was kind of the one taking over in the back half, so I do want to give him credit because he did it on frickin' Nidalee. Like, that shouldn't be how this goes. Like, it's just such a risky pick that looked like it was failing, and all of a sudden, don't doubt Canyon. Like, that really is kind of the takeaway from this, but Keen was excellent. You know, we talked about the top two. I feel like everybody on Gen.G was good, but maybe shockingly to some people, I'm going to give player of the series to Paze in this one. And I don't know how popular of a decision that's going to be, but I think when you look at the 3 games that they won in particular, but even the 5 games, when you're talking about the player that was the most consistent for Gen.G, the most consistently positive, Paze was really good in this series. This is the best that he has played in quite a long time, and he did it against JackeyLove. And again, that's not to take anything away from JackeyLove. JackeyLove was maybe, like, better. Like, maybe JackeyLove's player of the series, like, if you really want to go that route, but I tend to try and stay away from giving player of the series to the team that loses, even if the player was really, really good. Honestly, if you want to give JackeyLove player of the series, I don't necessarily blame you, but I'm going to give it to Paze because when you look at game number 1, like, he got super fed in the early game on the Kalista and was able to translate that. He was pretty integral towards their game 2 success, and honestly, he was huge here in game number 5 because his team fighting on Kalista is actually really, really good. And this is the difference between, like, NA and EU Kalistas versus, like, Eastern Kalistas, Western versus Eastern Kalistas. You know, EU fans say that Kalista is such a garbage trash pick because Noah shows up and isn't able to do any damage on it. And then Paze shows up and plays Kalista, and he's legit carrying team fights in terms of the damage he's actually able to put out. I can't tell you what the difference is, because watching it, it does look pretty much the same. But all I can tell you is that when a good player plays Kalista, like, they take over the game, and Paze was awesome. So he's going to get my player of the series as a whole here. Lehens was good. Not perfect, but good. Was saved a couple of times by Paze ult. And then Chovy was fine on the Corki, didn't really make any mistakes, was certainly less error-prone than his counterpart on the other side of this matchup in the back half of the game, which is all that he really needed to be, but there were times this series where Chovy was kind of gapped. Game 4 was not great, Game 3 was not great. You know, there are definitely some things that I think Chovy needs to clean up on, but he made it work in the end. So credit to Gen.G, they avoid the reverse sweep, and they are going to be moving on to winners finals here at MSI, which is really big. Top Esports now moving down into the lower part of the bracket, and I think a lot of fingers are going to get pointed at Cream here, rightfully and wrongfully. Cream did not play well here in Game 5. I'm not going to try and sit here and say that he was perfect. He had good pressure in the early game, but he's a Kali into Corki. That's how that matchup should go. His team fighting was horrendous. I mean, dying on the backline of that bot river fight, I think it was around, like, I want to say 15, 20 minutes into the game, the dragon fight. Unacceptable. I mean, truly, like, an unacceptable mistake. He was way too overeager. He was completely disconnected from his team, and he died for no reason, and it completely threw away all of the momentum TES had in the game. And then he did it again at the Baron fight, and it's like, okay, man, you gotta stop doing this. Like, you gotta chill out. I think a lot of fingers are going to get pointed at Cream because he wasn't good in Game 5. We saw the Hoopu rating of like 4.4, whatever it was. Let's keep it in mind, they're here in Game 5 because of Cream. Like, you can talk about how JackeyLove was the best player on TES in the series, and I agree with that. But a Cream playing as well as he did in Games 3 and 4, like, they don't make it to Game 5 without Cream. And so, for all the vitriol that this kid's probably going to get at his first international tournament ever, like, yeah, he kind of entered game number 5, and he should have been better here, but I'm not going to be too hard on him. He was awesome in this series. Games 1 through 4, even the 2 losses in games 1 and 2, he was pretty good. Game 1 in particular, he was pretty solid for Top Esports, and so I really don't want to be super critical of Cream. He just played poorly at a time where it really was a bad time to play poorly, but it is what it is. The rest of the team didn't exactly, like, dominate this game. JackeyLove and Mako, like I said, were good, and Tion had a couple of great moments here, but 369 getting beaten in the top lane with his R5 Urgot. I'm honestly worried a bit about 369. He's not been that great at this tournament. Even in the play-ins, there were some concerning moments, but, you know, against Team Liquid, it's like, okay, you know, you're beating Team Liquid. Awesome. You're the member of the team that I'm noticing the least. And then here, like, Keen was just better in this series. And I don't even think Keen was dominating. Keen was just better in this series. So 369, definitely someone I need to keep monitoring to see if there's going to be some underperformances. But again, we came into this tournament with him as my #1 top laner in the world. So I wanted to see a bit more. Like, maybe the expectations are too high, but it's 369. He's been rolling threes a lot more often than you would like. So for Top Esports, it's unfortunate, but you move down into the lower bracket. Now you play the winner of tomorrow's series between G2 and PSG. Obviously, that's likely going to be G2. Nothing is set in stone, but TES G2 would be an absolute banger. I'm really excited to see that. And then, you know, Gen.G now moving on to winners finals. You take on the winner of tomorrow's game as well, which is going to be Bilibili and T1 in the upper bracket. I mean, again, another banger, but we expected a team like Gen.G to be here. This isn't a shock. This isn't an upset. This is not a surprise. This is them taking care of business and being where they should be as one of the two best teams in the world. Maybe it was a little bit rockier than you would have liked. Maybe I'm not walking out of this series feeling super confident that Gen.G is going to get the job done at this tournament, but at the very least, they were able to get the job done in this series, and at least for now, that's all that matters. All right, but that is going to do it for my MSI day number 5 overview and analysis video. We got our upper bracket, round number 2 started. Our lower bracket, round number 1 started. We know 1 apiece from each side of that bracket. Of course, TL now moving on to round number 2 down in the lower bracket. Gen.G moving on to winners finals in the upper bracket. Tomorrow, we have a couple of series to cover. We might not cover them on the channel tomorrow. As you guys know, I try not to upload on Sundays just because it's a little bit of a busy day for me, but we've got a couple of series to preview at the end of this video, starting, of course, with G2 taking on PSG Talon. PSG Talon looked excellent against Bilibili Gaming, way better than they had any right to do. They took 2 games off of what is, in my opinion, the tournament favorite, and so that has to be taken into account. Their slow, methodical, macro-oriented style is super important, and honestly, there are parts of G2's game that I am a bit worried about, but at the end of the day, PSG really runs through whether or not Junjia and Maple are winning, and Maple in particular is needs a lot of resources and is going to need to have a great series in order for PSG to stay relevant, and I just don't know if Caps is going to have 2 quote-unquote down series back-to-back internationally. I just trust Caps way too much, and so G2 is going to be my favorite in that series. I think it should be a 3-0. Maybe PSG grabs a game, maybe it's a 3-1, but G2 should be able to take care of business, and I think them being in trouble would be a little bit of a disappointment for them, if I had to guess. And maybe I'm just overvaluing G2 right now, but I think it's an especially bad matchup for PSG. And then, you know, for the upper bracket, T1 taking on Bilibili. Man, this is an interesting one. The last time these two teams faced off, 9 of the 10 players were on the same teams, so we actually kind of got a little bit of a preview of that. Bilibili overloaded into the bot lane. They got Elk super far ahead, and they shut down Gumayushi as much as possible, and they forced T1 to kind of answer that, and they couldn't. So we'll see if that ends up happening again. I think Bilibili's favored for this. I don't feel super good about that. Like, Bilibili's just not looking the way I thought they would at this tournament, but quite frankly, T1 has also not looked the way that I thought they would at this tournament. Maybe they have. Honestly, their weaknesses have been exactly what I identified. I just didn't think they would struggle as much, you know, with a team like G2. But it's fine. Like, I'm still expecting this to be a positive thing for them overall. I think Bilibili wins this 3-2. That's going to be my prediction. Maybe it's a 3-1. Maybe it's a 3-0. Hell, like, T1's lost 3-0 this year already. Maybe they win it. Like, maybe T1 wins 3-1. Like, I'm not going to be shocked by basically any outcome of this. But Bilibili, I got to stick with the analysis that I saw in terms of the domestic leagues, and quite frankly, coming out of the domestic leagues, I just don't know how you could say that T1 was a better team than Bilibili Gaming. So I'm going to pick Bilibili purely based off of pre-tournament hype, but would love to know your thoughts and opinions down below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Would love to know what you think of all of that. I'm sorry about this video coming out a little bit later in the day. As you guys know, this is not my full-time job or anything. I can't be like K-Drill and Yamato that upload immediately after these series. I just don't have the resources to be able to record and watch like 9 games of League of Legends in one day and still get that out in a reasonable time when I've got a lot of other stuff in real life to do. So again, I really am trying to get these out as quickly as possible, but you got to bear with me, and I appreciate you guys sticking with me through that. If you did enjoy the video, leave a like. It really does mean a lot to me. Lets me know you guys are enjoying the content, and it does help get this video out to a lot more people, which I'm always very appreciative of. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button. We are covering every single day of MSI on this channel as quickly as possible, so if you're interested in comprehensive overviews of every game that's going to end up happening at this tournament, as well as coverage of the major regions once this tournament is done, hit subscribe, hit that bell so you can be notified when all of those videos do go live. But of course, with all that being said, I hope you all are having a great day. I hope you continue to have a great day, and I will see you all later.